Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at the Star City Games Players Championship, brought to you by Ultimate Garden Conics Chairs. I'm Nick Miller alongside reigning Players Champion Joe Lossett. Welcome back. You've been holding the title for a few years, but now we get to see if you get to keep it.
Yeah, well, it was half of that few years. It didn't mean much because there was no, but as soon as I got re-announced, then it was like, okay, it means something again. Yeah. Big day for me when that got announced.
Right. And it's back. You're here. You had your invite secured all along. We're going to be talking Modern today. You have been playing a lot of Tron as of late in the Modern format. This weekend, not the case.
No, not the case at all.
Not a single Tron land in the field. You're playing something completely different than we expect. Talk about how you came to Bant Snowblade.
So I actually played, because I knew going in, I was like, I have Tron in my pocket. I could play that, but I don't really want to. I tried, I think, 6 or 7 different, like 5-0 decks for Magic Online. I didn't love any of them, but I played like Blue Eye Control. Like this, I don't like this law. I played Bant Control. I was like, okay, this has something. I'm more interested in this. Didn't really like it much. I didn't think Cryptic Command was very good. I played Bant Stoneforge, and it has all these mana creatures. I didn't care much for that. I was like, okay. And I played a variety of other things as we're told and some nonsense stuff. And I basically tried 6 or 7 non-tier 1 decks is what I did. And then after all that, I was like, well, these are the cards I liked. Can I play half of the Bant Stoneforge deck and half of the Bant Control deck, the cards I like from both? And keeping in mind, as I was doing this, as throughout the whole process, there was really some cards I was kind of hoping I would play in whatever deck I was playing going into the whole event. And those were Isolate, which we'll get to, Mystical Dispute, and Veil of Summer. So if my deck ended up Bant, that'd be great, because those are all the cards I wanted to play in the sideboard. And so in some respects, I actually built the deck backwards, which I've never done before. I was like, these are the sideboard cards I want. Can I construct a deck that can play all those? And I think I did. And so that's kind of how...
All very powerful 1 mana sideboard cards, and we'll get to those. But for now, we'll get to the meat of the deck here. This is your creature base, Stoneforge Mystic, the namesake of the deck, along with the Snow, Icefang Quaddle, and Spell Queller. Spell Queller, a surprising high number of this card in the Modern format for this event. Very good in this style of deck. Take us through each of these cards here.
Yeah, so first, the pair of 2-drops are kind of central to what I want to be doing. I would ideally like to have one every game on turn 2, which we'll get to later, how we're trying to enable that. And the Spell Queller is a counter that's just, it's nice against the Urza decks, which I figured have to be popular because it gets basically everything relevant. And it gets around things like Cavern of Souls. It gets around Veil of Summer. And then in combination with Teferi, it's just fantastic.
Right.
So really, this is just kind of defense against creatures, defense against spells, and then just, generally good card.
Right. Everything holding together.
Yeah. And so it's not like overdawning creatures. There are no mana creatures for ramping. This is just all there is. And I wasn't entirely confident at the beginning that this was going to work, but it felt like enough.
Right, and we get to the next couple of slides. We'll see when you said you wanted to have the pieces of the control decks, your Snowblade deck more a control deck than a creature deck or a tempo deck. And we'll see here, you've got all the Planeswalkers. Even more on the next page, we got Jace the Mind Sculptor, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, Oko. This is the card that we're going to see the most of, I think, in Modern. Just makes your deck do it all.
Yeah, and then also, the other Teferi, Time Raveler also. So it's really, we have a curve, but the 2-drops are all creatures and the 3-drops are all Planeswalkers, which tends to work out pretty well. The Planeswalkers are very strong. Teferi, the big Teferi kind of was on the chopping block for most of the process, where it's like, well, if I had to cut something, it would be this. But so often we end up in points where we get to turn, let's say 6, and kind of resources of an exchange, there's not much around. And then anytime you draw Teferi, big Teferi in that point, you're like, wow, this is amazing. You rip it off, you can untap and protect it with Path or Queller or whatever, and it just takes over the game, really. And then obviously Oko is so fantastic. It deals with any artifacts that you want to mess with. It defends itself, sort of. And then, Jace is Jace. And I actually had 3 at the beginning. I was like, I'm going to trim this down a little bit because it's expensive, and this isn't a very high curve deck. And despite the fact that there's 2 4s and a 5.
Right. Most of the rest of the deck, all 3 and under, as you see here. The other busted 3 mana Planeswalker here, Teferi, as you said, works great with Spell Queller.
Yeah.
What else are you doing with it in this deck?
I mean, there's avenues for card advantage. We could bounce in any of our creatures really effectively, or the Astrolabes. It's setting back your opponent if I go first and I play a creature on 2, either one, and then they do anything, and I play Teferi on 3 and bounce something, are so far ahead at that point. And then also against all counter wars are one-sided when you have Teferi, and that's just worth so much. I'm playing it in both formats because that's so valuable.
Right. Astrolabe ties everything together. Yeah, draws your cards. Works the Teferi.
It makes the mana. The big thing is making the mana work. And then there's no spell cantrips in this deck. Like Serum Visions or something. But the Astrolabe works well enough, and it combos really well with Teferi. Sorry.
Move on to the
you go ahead and talk for a minute while I straighten this out.
We have the equipment here. We saw Batter Skull, but we also have more coming up. I want to talk about this page here because all new cards, all fantastic. Once Upon a Time, already banned in Standard, already banned in Pioneer. 2 copies in this deck, and it's not a deck you would expect to see Once Upon a Time.
Sure. So the forces were basically there all the time. They were between having 2 or 3 of them. That was basically locked in the whole time. The other 2 cards were not. There were mana leaks for a long time. One of the lists that I took from Magic Online to practice with had mana leaks in it and Cryptic Commands. And Cryptic Commands I discarded fairly early on because it's too expensive, and there's too many cheap cards that just blow it out in other people's 75s. The Once Upon a Times came along pretty late in the process. I had 1 more land at that point, and I wasn't thrilled with the mana leaks, but I was like, I need something. I need to have more things to do on turn 2. It can't be just 2 sets of creatures and then that's it, because you're not going to have one every time. And so mana leak is something you can do, even though I didn't like it. And then I was actually in the car driving home from somewhere, and it just occurred to me, well, hold on a second. I don't want to. There's not another creature I want, but I can play more of the creatures I already have by playing Once Upon a Times. So I got excited about that. I put 2 in. 3 felt like because there's only we actually went to a 3rd spell queller when these went in because I wanted to not miss too often, and I've been pretty happy with it. I cut a land, and then the mana leaks went out, and then Once Upon a Times came in, and then Disputes came in. But yeah, Once Upon a Times just gives you more of the 2 drops that I want, and then also I can hit if I need Field of Ruin or something. You can hit that, and it's. I'm very happy with the card.
Right. And then instead of mana leak, we have the Dispute there.
Yeah, and
it's going to be good in this field with all the people playing Snow decks and Urza.
Yeah, and so the thought this was because I found myself, I had the mana leaks in the main deck, and I had Disputes in the sideboard and other stuff, and what was consistently happening is I was boarding out, because I didn't have room for everything, mana leaks were getting boarded out for Disputes against blue decks, and that felt terrible. It felt like there was spots in the sideboard just being wasted. So I was like, can I get away with Disputes main deck? And yeah, maybe against Burn, there's a few decks where, okay, yes, it's definitely worse, but against all the blue decks, it's better. And I think importantly against decks against Primeval Titan, for example, it doesn't matter. Right. Because by the time they're casting Titan, I'm going to have 3 mana anyway, so I can afford the extra. So I was like, I'll just cheat a little bit and throw these in the main.
Sure. All right, then we'll move on here. Supreme Verdict, you got your sweepers in the main deck, Path to Exile, your extra removal. So as we mentioned, the control deck package, you have it here.
Right. And so the Path is obviously going to be there. All the low to the ground creature versions or the bigger ones, they're all going to have Path. And you're going to have a second equipment. There's a consideration for running a third, whether in the main or the board. I ended up not doing that. And Feast of Famine is, you pretty clearly want to have a green protection sword. And this actually gains material advantage. So hypothetically, if Sword of Fire and Ice was protection from green and blue instead of green or blue and red, maybe I would play that one. Because either way, you want protection from green and you want to gain material. Like the milling on Sword of Body and Mind doesn't matter, really. Right. So them discarding or me drawing, I would have taken either one, and Pro Green is what I wanted.
Pro Green mainly for Oko, I imagine?
Yeah. Because either their own Oko things or anything that I Oko, either way. Plus a lot of ground creatures like against John, there's just a lot of green stuff on the ground. So it's valuable. Also, other people's Ice Fang Quaddles being able to get through and hit in the air, because if those are the only 2 flyers on the board, really what you do is connect, and that does it.
Sure.
The verdicts, I think, are going to set my deck apart from other decks of this type, of the Stoneforge decks. And I'm really happy with it. It's one thing is, the Supreme Verdict makes the deck hard to play against because you can't flood the board because you just wiped out. And you can't try and go too slow because all the Planeswalkers can build resources. And so the Verdict, in general, I don't like having cards. It's almost, in my mind, like the cardinal sin of Chalice of the Void on one and playing Expedition Map in your deck, which I hate when people do that, even though it makes sense, but it's so annoying. And like this is what we're doing here, kind of. Also, the little Teferi with Supreme Verdict is pretty cool, being able to flash it in or just rescue your guys first. And no, I've been very happy with it. I actually considered playing another one in the board.
Right. With how many Planeswalkers you do have the advantage of getting to set up the Supreme Verdict and then having all the extra Planeswalkers.
Yeah. Something that happens much more often than I originally expected is if you have both Planeswalkers on both sides, like Oko versus Oko or Oko versus something, is Supreme Verdict, clear the board, then animate with Oko and attack and kill their Planeswalker. That happens a lot, and it's very nice to be able to do.
All right, we'll move on here. Mana base here, pretty stock, but we will highlight the Field of Ruin. You have 3 copies of this. Expecting big mana, or what were you hedging for here? Because the field actually shakes out to there's not a ton of big mana, but you do have the answers here if you need it.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, it's better to have it and then not need it than the other way around. 3 felt like a pretty big number, but the Astrolabes kind of let the rest of the mana, gives you a lot of cushion. And I don't have other 1-drops, so the Astrolabe never gets gummed up with something else in game 1 anyway that I want to use the mana on. And then it's for, deck thing matters really, but not especially because you're doing it for both players. But the being able to pick off lands against Amulet, there might be Celestial Colonnades, things like that. It's pretty free. Sure. Like I would say 2 is definitely free, and the third one was worth giving up. Really, not very much.
Okay. Well, let's move through the rest of the mana base here because I want to talk about these cards that you highlighted at the beginning that you basically built your deck around. So we'll get to the sideboard here, and I want to talk about Isolate first because this is a card from the printing, obviously powerful, but it never really found a home, and it really hasn't cracked that many lists. Talk about it. 3 copies is a lot.
Yeah. So this is the card I've had my eye on for about a year, and I actually tried to see if I could fit it into Tron's sideboard because I like the card so much, but that's a pretty big stretch. Right. So the card really is the only card back over the last. I mean, I didn't play a ton of Modern this year, but I've certainly watched them, and like even in the last year too. Amulet is a very popular deck, and it's gone through points where it was the most popular. They're the most powerful deck in the format. And Isolate is the only card I could think of or find, and I looked hard, that can deal with both of Amulet's 1-drops on the first turn. It hits the Amulet Vigor itself and I remember the
Tribe Scout,
the land drop card, and he gets both of them for it. And that's specifically I felt like was so valuable that I was interested in it just based on that. And then we have against like Burn and Prowess, you pick off the 1-drops is great there. Death Shadow, you hit the namesake card of the deck. There's obviously matchups where you're not going to touch it, but when it comes in, it's excellent because it's so cheap, and you're never trading ahead on mana. Like it's not like pathing a 3-drop because you're always trading even on mana with the card. But it doesn't matter because those decks, a lot of times when you have big important one mana cards, you're counting on the opponent having to spend more mana to blow it up than you are to cast it, and we're kind of bypassing that here. So I was really excited about the card. I think it works well in the deck. I'm super happy about it.
Got Disdainful Stroke here against the big mana stuff. We've got Damping Sphere here against what you usually expect. So we'll move on here. Those cards are pretty self-explanatory. But then the other card you talked about, Veil of Summer, more Mystical Disputes here, along with the rest in peace. You got all the 1-mana interaction.
Yeah, we got all the cheap stuff. And this is what I was saying. Cryptic Command felt so bad because like you're playing Mystical Dispute counters are for 1. It's terrible. Veil of Summer counters are for 1. Ugh. I wanted 4 Mystical Disputes. I figured there'd be a ton of Urza decks, but I couldn't make it happen. 3 had to be satisfied with. And yeah, it's a super strong card against. I mean, it's when their defense cost is blue and expensive, and their threats are blue and expensive, then Dispute is just fantastic.
Tough to go wrong.
Yeah, and then Rest in Peace, actually, so we have kind of the Vengevine, Crabvine decks, which is valuable there. one of the questions that repeatedly came up over the last, I don't know, week or so of thinking about this event was when it's not obvious that you want maxed on these, how many do you bring in? Because against, let's say, like Prowess, I mean, it shuts off a decent number of the cards, especially the Bedlam Reveler, which is a real big one. Against Urza, it shuts off Emery, and it disrupts their mystical Sanctuary to land. So there's a few, like Death Shadow, it shuts off some of their threats. So there's a number of decks where you want some of them, and then there are the actual grave decks where you want all of them. So figuring out how many you want in different matchups took some work, and we may have gotten wrong, but having the three felt pretty easy in the first place. Yeah.
Veil of Summer, I don't think we have to really say anything about this card. It's banned in a bunch of formats. People want it banned in the other formats.
Yeah.
It does work.
It's so good. Everyone loves Veil of Summer, and I think it's better than people think. I discovered this a couple weeks ago, and I wasn't going to tell anybody about it, but I'm excited. I want to talk about it. So Veil of Summer against Death Shadow, they have the Royal Zions, and Death Shadow always puts itself at a low life total. And this wasn't initially clear to me, but then I was like reading the cards, like Royal Zions isn't worded the way normally you'd think a card would be written. So against Death Shadow, when they ultimate Royal Zions, if you can cast Veil in response so they can't shoot you, and then, path their creature, which they no longer can counter, they have to kill themselves, which is insanely cool. And people aren't going to see that come. Maybe they will now, but how cool! This card is awesome.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on here to wrap things up. Got all your sideboard cards. You got all the cards you want to play in your main deck. How did you feel the Modern format was going to look at this event? What caused you to build this deck as it was? What do you expect the meta to be? How do you feel your position?
I mean, I think there's going to be... Urza will be the biggest deck, I would imagine. Maybe it's half. There'll be some big mana decks, Amulet, and other than that, I didn't really have an idea. I didn't really metagame too much against the players. The old Players Championships would kind of try to do that. But this time I was like, I'm just going to build a deck that works against the field. And maybe that is a disadvantage in some ways, but still I'll end up with a solid deck that I'm happy with. I feel more confident in Modern than the other two formats. That is not something a month ago that I would have said was very likely to happen. But I like this deck. I feel good about it. And I'm excited. All
right. Well, you're here to defend your title. That's the Modern deck. Joe, thanks for joining me here in the Sideboard. Stay tuned to Star City Games all weekend long for the action here in Roanoke.